Isabel Ewing, former National MP Agnes Loheni, and Canterbury University sociologist, gang expert and author Dr. Jared Gilbert. Welcome to you all. Jared, let's talk to you about gangs. We just heard from the Minister. Overall, what are your thoughts on what he said?
He's over it, isn't he? And he's got to walk, and I think he has walked, a really delicate line between the politics and the practicalities here.
When you say he's over it, do you mean he's over the detail?
Yeah, he does seem over the detail, and I think we were talking earlier perhaps that this is why he's in that role now, because the government had perhaps lost the narrative here, and so I think he's going some way to get that back. But look, I did some research on the last time we had a big legislative thrust on gangs in New Zealand in the mid-1990s, and the similarities between now and then are absolutely remarkable. And it's quite possible that the outcomes will be the same too.
What were the outcomes then?
Well, the one that I picked up on, actually, and it was a very good question to the Minister, that these laws, many of these laws aren't gang laws. They are general law and order provisions, and what we found with the gang laws from the 1990s is that the ones that were used, and many of them were never used, never came out of the never used at all. Yeah. The ones that were used were more often used against non-gang members than gang members, and I think this is important for the debate because when they're couched as gang laws, that perhaps they're not given the same scrutiny because the public thinks, oh, it's just
right. So let's just unpack that a little bit, and then we'll get to the others. But the experts here. We're talking about the warrants there. He's saying that they are going to be very specific. So that is ring-fenced?
Yeah, look, of all of the provisions, there's no harm done in these. Of the 4 of the 5, I think, seem sensible. What impact they'll have, we could debate that. But the warrants are the ones that need a look. When you're starting to go into people's homes, they're very, very strong police powers. In a modern Western democratic state, we should take that very, very seriously. And so the devil will be in the detail there. But the thing that I'm pleased about, and I think we can see this in the package as a whole, actually, is that they've taken a fairly mature approach. They haven't gone all out and sort of kowtowed to political pressure.
Yep.
Because even in those warrant searches, they in the detail that we've got, they're for a short period and they're quite specific. Now, so there's more detail to come.
That's right. They've got to work through that.
They're not terrible.
You talked about political pressure there, Agnes. Is your view that they have caved into political pressure because they are sort of last cab off the rank in terms of ACT and National and bringing out this kind of gang policy?
I think the ministers had to come out hard and fast on this issue. Look, just in my area, West Auckland, we had 2 shootings yesterday and 1 woman earlier also this week to gun violence. No doubt about it, this is front and foremind of many people at the moment. They're not feeling safe in their homes. And politics, you know, people want this addressed and they want it addressed now. And they want the minister to come out hard on gangs.
But have they done it as a result of the political pressure of the other parties?
Yeah, I'd say the pressure of the parties has added to it, and the pressure is also coming from the public.
Right.
And so that's the reaction. The public are hearing these cases daily now, and so you know the minister. And I have to say, I think the government has made the right decision in putting Chris Hipkins in as police minister. This is an issue that needs to be dealt with, you know, with high priority.
Yep. Okay. So, Isabel, we've got Chris Hipkins coming in, Mr. Fix It, right? Isn't he? You know, he gets COVID-19, he gets health. Now he's got police. So Poto Williams, I mean, probably had this stuff under development, and he gets to announce it. What happened there?
Well, Simon, I think yes, I think obviously these changes were sort of in the pipeline there, but the turnaround was pretty quick in terms of the changes that we're seeing announced this week. And I think you have to hand it to Chippy. The guy can get across a large amount of information and portfolio fast. And I think also, as you saw in that interview, he's got that sort of Teflon factor. He's able to just handle media pressure. And Poto Williams, as we have seen, can't handle the pressure. And I think you have to remember that Poto Williams was given that job at a time where, you know, the Prime Minister was thinking that she had a mandate to put a person in that role who's a departure from the police ministers that we've seen in the past and the hard-on crime guys like Stuart Nash and Judith Collins. You know, you've got Poto Williams, who perhaps is the police minister that this country needs but isn't ready for. But then she's also no good under pressure and she crumbles under it.
Right, but was she given enough support perhaps in that role? Seeing as her appointment was a departure, as you say, should she have been given more support in that role?
I think she was kind of thrown under the bus. I mean, we can't ignore the fact that she obviously cannot do an interview like we just saw Chippy do with you. You know, she can't remain composed under pressure. But I think that if the government was looking at a time when she did get that role to go in that direction, we were looking at, there were discussions around defunding the police, the armed response trials, where there was huge, resistance in the public to that. If the Labor government was looking to go in that direction with a police minister, and then some political pressure piles on, and they just decide, oh shoot, we've got to get rid of Porter Williams. I just think that's a real shame. But it comes back to the fact also that as a politician, you need to be able to cope with the hard questions, and she can't.
One of the hard things, just finally on the gangs, Jared and Agnes, is the solution of recruitment, right? So there's the attractive lifestyle there, isn't there, Jared? Are they doing enough at that top of the cliff level?
No, of course not. But I'm at least pleased to hear that this is part of the conversation. And this actually comes back to the problems that Porto had to some degree, is that this is a really complex area. Make no bones about it. And it's very easy to say, just crush the gangs, just hit them hard. You can do that in a soundbite, and it sounds kind of sensible.
A lot of people do that in a soundbite, don't they?
But to explain why it's complex and the sophistication required of the solutions in a broader sense takes a lot more time, right? Same problem I've got now. We're going to cut to ads.
Yep. No, we're not going to ads. But I am going to move on to Pacific Island Forum. Again, very complex. No, that's all right. Cutting you off, Jared. Let's turn to the Pacific Island Forum. I'm going to go back to you, Isabel. You've just come back from there late last night. Biggest takeaway from it?
Well, certainly looking at the Pacific Islands Forum hasn't met in person for 3 years, and there's been talk, the Prime Minister, we heard from her, about unity, regionalism, and I was just amazed, well, not amazed, but I'm really taken by the fact that the leaders were obviously all on the same page there with making sure they emerged as a united front. The last meeting we saw face-to-face literally ended in tears, with the Aussies digging their heels in over coal and climate change, and it was clear that this time around, the leaders, Frank Bainimarama, the chair, he really didn't want to have headlines saying, leaders argue long into the night, can't agree. So the Prime Minister saying, we've emerged in daylight, that is a real sign that the leaders are looking with, the circling of China and the US, and the fact that we've seen this instability and uncertainty over the last 3 years. They are so focused on unity, and that's what they've achieved.
But Agnes, we have seen, obviously, China, trying to exert its influence in the Pacific, and then we had Kamala Harris turn up at the forum. It's so overt, the power plays in the Pacific at the moment.
It's very overt, and also, with Kamala Harris being... It's interesting that, she was invited at last minute by the Fijian Prime Minister to address the forum, because normally non-member nations don't address the forum directly like this. And so it could be, interpreted that the forum has chosen their strategic partner. That, it's
just by way of invitation. So you're saying that China's been sort of, done its best, been told to go away, and in comes the US.
So US were invited, no one else was invited. Look, the US have indicated they are going to be more present in the Pacific with the announcement of the 2 US embassies in Tonga and Kiribati. And speaking of Kiribati, I think it's really, really important that the forum does what it can to bring Kiribati back to the table and have those conversations, those hard-hitting conversations at the table as part of the forum.
So we're talking about, geopolitical tensions there. You're talking about unity, but really what they care about is climate change. As an observer from the outside, Jared, did that really get enough coverage?
I'm not sure that it did, but it's got to be. I think it's abstract. We were talking, weren't we, that this can be quite abstract for countries like ours because it seems quite distant. For some of those smaller Pacific Island countries, this is very immediate. It's an existential threat. So you could see why it needs to be at the top of the
did they get that message through, Isabel?
I would disagree. I think our climate coverage was excellent. We had that covered. But I think the message was so clear. As Jared says, Tuvalu is literally going underwater, and there are discussions around the fact that they're going to have legal recognition to be a country that doesn't have a landmass, and that's a heartbreaking thing to even consider. And so I think the countries are really, they know what the main issue is, and they will be looking. And I think we need to give some credit to the Pacific Islanders. They're not going to just say, the US, China suddenly paying us some attention, we're just going to go with them. What's important in the Pacific is relationships and mutual respect. And so I don't think we're going to see the Pacific jump to one superpower or another. We're going to see, they'll take their time. They've seen the US come in 10 years ago and make big offers. They've seen it all before.
And so, China as well. Exactly. All right. I'm going to leave it there for the moment. Thank you so much for your time. Jared Gilbert, Agnes Lohenny and Isabel Ewing.